Wait, Luke, I'm confused. I thought the Republicans were the only ones who had botched their COVID response, and the Democrats were the sensible good guys.
Yes, Michael, that is what we are going to be talking about today. Whether the Democrats have actually gotten away with a bad COVID response, have they botched things, maybe not as bad as the Republicans, but to a degree which you would probably not expect. Of course, Donald Trump, when he was president, he took all the headlines, and now, of course, he's gone. His COVID response was, I think it's fair to say, horrible. I mean, he didn't really seem to have a COVID response apart from promoting hydroxychloroquine, I hope I got that right, and insisting that scientists look into injecting bleach into their patients as well, which was an all-time press conference. And he may have actually made the COVID situation worse in America. I believe his administration also stopped the US Postal Service from sending a mask to everyone in America, and he also actively encouraged people not to wear masks initially. So here's the thing, it's easy to see based on that why Trump got a lot of heat from the media, since he didn't really help the COVID situation that well. And he was one of the reasons why the United States has one of the worst death rates in the world regarding COVID. And I think the worst death toll. I think they have the highest death toll. Yeah, they must do. Which other country would come close to it? So, yeah, it's easy to see why Trump took a lot of the heat, like I said. But all the attention on Trump, the question is, has it shifted the spotlight away from Democrats who have done a bad job regarding the coronavirus, who appear to be making the same mistakes as Trump and doing all the exact same dumb stuff that he did? Well, that's what we're going to look at in this video. And of course, I'd say this is important because one of the Democrats who has somehow managed not to be criticised for their COVID response is New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. And here's the thing about Cuomo, in polls for who's going to be the Democratic nominee for the 2024 presidential election, Cuomo scores quite well, and it's all because of this COVID response of his. But Michael, we're going to peer behind the curtain here, and you've got some interesting stories and facts about Cuomo's coronavirus response that you'd like to tell us, haven't you?
Yes, I did, Luke, and I've also heard that Andrew Cuomo is quite popular. In fact, I saw an article in The Guardian called "Andrew Cuomo is no hero, though. He's to blame for New York's coronavirus catastrophe," and linked to it was a pretty detailed study comparing the early responses in New York compared to California. And it pointed out a few issues with Cuomo's early response to the coronavirus. And of course, you could make an argument that the early response is, what really matters because it's the way to nip it in the bud, as they say. And there are a few big issues. The first one being that there is actually a beef between de Blasio, of course, the mayor of New York, and Cuomo, of course, the governor. This is a quote from the report. "For years, Cuomo and de Blasio, each of whom has harbored national political ambitions, had engaged in a kind of intrastate Cold War, a rivalry that to many often felt childish and counterproductive." Cuomo actually said when Bill de Blasio was talking about wanting to shut down New York City, which of course he would want to do because New York City is incredibly dense, Cuomo came out saying only the governor has the power to do that, obviously a bit of flexing, and he ended up shutting down the entire state on the 22nd of March, 5 days after de Blasio. And of course, it's been observed by several experts that had New York imposed its extreme social distancing measures a week or two earlier, the death toll might have been cut by half or more.
Yeah, I remember that, Michael. I remember Cuomo refusing to shut down earlier, and yeah, this childish feud he has with de Blasio is hilarious, but also when it causes more deaths than necessary, a lot more deaths than necessary, it is, depressing as well.
Yeah, Luke, depressing is the right word. And I think the other issue is that Cuomo just seemed to not really have the right idea about what he wanted to do. And in particular, he put a lot of focus, his big strategy was to try and laser focus on particular areas. And for example, he put a big stress early on having a huge number of tests because he wanted to see where were most people testing positive so he could have localized lockdowns to deal with the coronavirus in the places where it was most prominent, where most people were testing positive. One such place being New Rochelle, that was a big focus, and after 100 positive tests there, he decided to act. Similarly, he was very focused on making sure that people would quarantine if they were coming from certain countries, obviously China, but also places like Italy. He put a big focus on trying to have very clear crosshairs on who he was targeting. However, according to the report, quote, "It was yet another waste of precious time, energy, and resources chasing the lost idea that the virus could be contained." Because you might say, hypothetically, surely that sounds good. He wanted to identify where the problem was the worst. He wanted to focus on the individuals who might be the biggest problem. But the issue is that New York City in particular, and obviously the surrounding conurbation, is incredibly dense. And the reality is that as soon as one person had been infected, the disease had actually spread very far, is basically the point. And Cuomo had this idea that it was possible to focus on a few specific individuals, a few specific areas, and therefore curb the spread of the disease. But many of the officials were coming out and saying, no, that's not the best strategy because New York is incredibly dense. The reality is that it's probably spread very far, and the only thing that can be done is a general lockdown. So that specific approach just wasn't the right approach in this scenario. And people had pointed out to Cuomo, but as we've already established, he was very reticent to do a broader lockdown. And the final issue is that Cuomo was very inconsistent in his messaging. Obviously, we're from the UK and we all remember very fondly Boris Johnson's rambling responses when it came to explaining how exactly people should treat the virus, and Cuomo was no exception. I do have a fun little quote from him. He says, "The panic we are seeing is outpacing the reality of the virus." I think that's a good quote to summarize his mentality. But also, again, this is from the report, on March 11th, he told New Yorkers that they only needed to worry if they were in a vulnerable situation, if they were an elderly person, if they were somebody who was immunocompromised or had some kind of respiratory issue, so pretty much downplaying it, saying you only need to worry in that situation. The very next day, he then said, we're going to ban any mass gatherings of more than 500 people. So, slightly more general. And then 3 days after that, he warned of a wave of COVID-19 cases that could, quote, crash our healthcare system. So within basically the span of 5 days, he went from, it's only really something you've got to worry about if you're in a very specific medical situation or a particular age group, to then saying, oh, let's employ some general issues, to then, oh, this could crash our entire healthcare system. So again, that kind of inconsistency, which when you want to get the public on board with behaving in an appropriate way to curb the virus, is obviously not the kind of thing that an effective leader should be doing in leading the response to COVID.
Yeah, and I remember back almost a year ago now, Cuomo was portrayed as this star compared to Trump. Like, Trump was all over the place, but Cuomo was telling New Yorkers what to do and how to do it. And what was not reported at the time, of course, was that Cuomo completely botched the start of the virus. But I'm going to now talk about what has happened in recent days because, of course, cases are coming down, there's a vaccine now, and how is Cuomo dealing with all this? Well, this is from Reuters. Cuomo is set to move up the date on which New York City restaurants may reopen their indoor dining rooms to Friday, February the 12th, from the previously announced Sunday, February the 14th, which is, of course, Valentine's Day, one of the industry's busiest days. Now, I think right here, that is probably the worst possible thing you can do, is allow indoor dining. I mean, people can't wear masks and everyone is indoors at lack of ventilation. Even at 25% capacity, you're going to see probably an increase just because of that. But no, Cuomo is pressing ahead of it. Also, if you remember, again, back last year, one of the big controversies of the Cuomo COVID response was that he had unnecessarily killed quite a lot of old people in nursing homes, and this has come back to bite him. This is from last Thursday. A judge rules that Cuomo's administration broke the law by failing to hand over data on COVID-19 deaths in nursing homes to Watchdog after undercounting death toll by 50%, Michael, 50%. Oof. Attorney General Letitia James previously found that the Cuomo administration misled the public about COVID. James' report concluded that the health department undercounted deaths associated with nursing homes by at least, like we said, 50%. And Health Commissioner Howard Zucker has since released a general tally after James issued her report, noting that there have been 12,743 confirmed and presumed deaths of nursing home residents in both nursing homes and hospitals as of January the 19th. But the Cuomo administration had only acknowledged 8,711 residents who had died in nursing homes until James's report was released. So yeah, that's 4,000 more residents in nursing homes had died than Cuomo's administration wanted to say. And do you remember Cuomo's response to this, Michael? He said it in an interview. It was incredibly callous. I think that's the right word for it. Here's the video.
But who cares? 33, 28, died in a hospital, died in a nursing home. They died.
So yeah, a very callous response, like I said, from Cuomo during that news conference after this revelation came out. But that is not all, Michael, because I'm about to read an article from the New York Times that was released about a week ago, which is titled 9 Top New York Health Officials Have Quit as Cuomo Scorns Expertise. He scorns expertise, huh? That sounds like a certain Mr. Trump right there. Let's get into the article. The Deputy Commissioner for Public Health at the New York State Department resigned in late summer. Soon after, the director of its Bureau of Communicable Disease Control also stepped down. So did the medical director. Last month, the state epidemiologist said she too would be leaving. The drumbeat of high-level departures in the middle of the pandemic came as morale plunged in the health department, and senior health officials expressed alarm to one another over being sidelined and treated disrespectfully. Their concern had an almost singular focus: Governor Andrew Cuomo. Even as the pandemic continues to rage and New York struggles to vaccinate a large and anxious population, Mr. Cuomo has all but declared war on his own public health bureaucracy. Sounds like another another guy who was in the White House a few weeks ago. The departures have underscored the extent to which pandemic policy has been set by the governor, with who his aides crafted a vaccination program beset by early delays. The troubled rollout came after Mr. Cuomo declined to use long-standing vaccination plans that the State Department of Health had developed in recent years in coordination with local health departments. Mr. Cuomo instead adopted an approach that relied on large hospital systems to coordinate vaccinations, not only of their own staffs, but also of much of the population. In recent weeks, the governor has repeatedly made it clear that he believed he had no choice but to seize more control over pandemic policy from state and local public health officials, who he said had no understanding of how to conduct a real-world, large-scale operation like vaccinations. Do you want to hear what he has to say about experts?
When I say experts, in air quotes, it sounds like I'm saying I don't really trust the experts, because I don't.
Wow. Trumpian.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought when I heard it. It's like that could have come straight from the lips of Donald Trump. But he's a Democrat, you know. He listens to the science, doesn't he? Remember, this is a guy who, during the midst of this pandemic, found time to write a 300-page book about his administration's response to COVID-19 and all the success he had. And now he's diminishing experts. By the way, his approval rating currently in the state of New York is 56%. Which is crazy, considering if Donald Trump had made all these mistakes which we have outlined, I'm guessing that his approval rating in New York would not be 56%. So again, I think this is another example of Trump basically being so bad that it's obscured and really made into a star one of the worst governors, certainly on the Democratic side, who has dealt with this pandemic. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, definitely. I think, hey, who knows? Maybe that could be another reason why Biden being president now could be a good thing, because there is no longer this very low standard that American political officials are compared to, you know, and people, you can't just say, oh, it's okay, he's not Trump. So yeah, maybe that's the reason why Biden's fantastic, because definitely Cuomo isn't.
And speaking of Joe Biden, Michael, that's what we're going to talk about now. The current president of the United States. He is also a Democrat, of course. Now, he hasn't been in the job long. But he did give a very interesting interview to CBS News the other day and was asked about schools opening. And yeah, take a look at this very interesting clip.
Let's turn to schools.
Sure.
About 20 million American children have not been in the classroom for nearly a year. There's a mental health crisis happening.
There really is.
Women are dropping out of the workforce. Is this a national emergency?
It is a national emergency. It generally is a national emergency.
Do you think it's time for schools to reopen?
I think it's time for schools to reopen safely. Safely. You have to have fewer people in the classroom. You have to have ventilation systems that have been reworked. Our CDC commissioner is going to be coming out with science-based judgment within, I think, as early as Wednesday, as to lay out what the minimum requirements are.
So he wants kids back at school safely, though. And he says, you know, there's got to be less kids in classes and there's got to be a better ventilation system, etc. I don't know if he knows, Michael, but American schools, they're not the best funded. And to perform operations like that, especially the ventilation thing, and to have more teachers in so they can, you know, teach the extra kids because classrooms are going to have to be smaller, that's going to be a pretty hard thing to do unless various states want to increase their education budget. And also what I find funny about that clip, we can see a screenshot right now. Look at the distance between them, the interviewer and Joe Biden. Like, you're talking about reopening schools when you have hundreds of kids packed together inside classrooms, which of course, definitely in the winter, aren't going to be ventilated. That's going to cause issues. And of course, kids are probably not going to die of COVID, but they can spread it just like anyone else. I mean, the crucial thing about schools, and this is why I think you see Biden wanting to get people back, it's, you know, they don't really care about mental health so much so as they care about the fact that parents have to stay home and therefore they can't go to work. The interviewer kind of alluded to it, but she did the identity politics thing of talking about women. It's that the fact that, basically parents, male and female, have to stay at home to look after their kids, and therefore they can't go back to work and contribute to the economy. It's not a public safety matter. What it is an economic matter. You're putting the economy ahead of public safety, and to me that does not sound like following the science, despite what Joe Biden said. So that's my take on that. What do you think?
No, yeah, I think ultimately the economy is the top priority for Biden and moderate Democrats in general, which is arguably quite funny because the entire reason why the COVID pandemic has been so difficult to deal with is because of the current state of many capitalist economies as they exist right now, and that is something that does need to be redressed.
So yeah, that's Joe Biden, Michael. Nothing else to say about him, but of course he's only been in his job for a few weeks. Let's talk about Governor Newsom of California. Another prominent Democrat. Of course, we talked about the governor of New York. Now we'll talk about the governor of California, the two big Democratic states. And Gavin Newsom, he started off well, Michael, really like Cuomo, but things haven't gone so well recently. Do you want to tell us a bit about his handling of the COVID pandemic?
Yes, I absolutely do. And yeah, basically, Newsom, he did start off as a bit of a success story. And of course, things have gone really to pot quite recently. In Southern California, the capacity in ICU wards hit 0% in mid-December. But don't worry about it. Newsom has a plan, I like this, to train new nurses for the ICU wards in his 2-day program. So apparently, I'm not an expert. I did hear that apparently many of the nurses currently working at the ICU wards are somewhat skeptical that it's possible to be adequately trained in 2 days, and I'm not surprised that that would be the case. It sounds like it would be ridiculous. And obviously, again, you are seeing similar priorities when it comes to the economy. Entertainment, retail, things like that have been opened, but schools have remained closed. Lots of people are saying, hey, put the focus on the more important things before you start opening up shopping and things like that. So that does suggest a desire to, stimulate the economy at the cost of public health. And also, on the subject of the economy, there was a 1.6 million person backlog when it came to food stamps and other unemployment benefits. So food banks have been crowded, and of course that has led to a increase in the number of people getting infected, especially amongst poorer communities. And to top it all off, Newsom came under a bit of more personal scrutiny when, in the midst of all of this, he went to a restaurant in violation of the lockdown restrictions that he had imposed, and he was not wearing a mask or social distancing. So overall, quite a series of issues over a relatively short period of time, and it's certainly not made Newsom come off as a particularly adept handler of the COVID pandemic.
Yes, Michael. The restaurant, by the way, was called the French Laundry, and he was there because he was celebrating the top lobbyist in California's birthday with Governor Newsom. Just the most Democratic Party thing you could possibly imagine. But yeah, Governor Newsom has made a series of blunders, I'd say. I'm going to read about a few here. This is from The Guardian. Legislatures were divided over his decision to lift regional stay-at-home orders a week after the state surpassed 3 million coronavirus cases. Health workers have been dismayed that some of his recent health directives have diverged from establishment and emerging scientific research. He has bickered with teachers' unions and parents over when and how to reopen the state's public schools. Activists say he is failing Latino and Black residents, Californians with disabilities and essential workers who are dying at disproportionate rates. And jobless Californians struggling to access unemployment benefits have cursed the administration's bureaucratic inertia. For many across the states, Newsom's announcements on the economy, vaccine distribution, or school reopenings have felt increasingly dissonant from the dire realities as the pandemic progressed. Yeah, so basically on every single front, he's messing up, and let's get onto something a bit more specific here, which is the vaccine distribution. This is from Deadline. There has been continuing confusion over who's eligible and what phase of Governor Newsom's vaccine rollout counties are in. Some of that has been because the plan itself has changed. Some of it has been because of the language it uses. Tiers is also an important term deployed in the governor's reopening plan. Some of it has been because, as Newsom says, he has allowed local health officials latitude in determining who gets the vaccine, so the qualified population shifts from county to county. Right now, California is in phase 1A of vaccine distribution, which covers healthcare workers as well as workers and residents at skilled nursing facilities and other long-term homes. However, some counties are moving into phase 1B, tier 1, which includes people 65 and older and workers in education like teachers. And yeah, basically, this is what I found is crazy about California's vaccine distribution. You could be living next door to somebody who can get the vaccine, and you can't because they live in a different county to you. And whether you're in tier 1A or tier 1B, it seems quite complicated and needlessly so. But I guess that's what Democrats love. They love bureaucracy. They love all the technocratic stuff. They love the tier system, don't they? Like, oh, you're in this category, you're in this category, you're in this category. Same thing with Cuomo in New York. He's like, he has to have, a massive amount of control over the vaccine and who can get it, instead of just a basic policy of, hey, just sign up and just make sure you can, we'll try and get you one as quick as possible, whatever you are. And of course you need priority groups, but yeah, the vaccine rollout in California just seems needlessly complicated. And that's why New York and California are both lagging behind states such as North Dakota and South Dakota in terms of vaccine rollout, which is crazy considering how dense those two states are compared to like the Dakotas. So yeah, Newsom not having a good time of it. But crucially, Michael, he did tweet this. It's a time cover of Amanda Gorman, who of course performed at the inauguration. And Newsom's captioned it on Twitter. Amanda, clap, Gorman, clap on the cover of Time. He's literally done the clapping meme non-ironically to celebrate black women. So yeah, you love to see it. That's what he's spending his days doing. He also tweeted something the other day, which I think was abolish the death penalty. And again, he's the governor of the state. I think we talked about this before when a few months ago he tweeted climate change is real to on his Twitter account after the California wildfires. And then a few weeks later he allowed a lot of permits from oil and gas companies in the state of California. So yeah, that's who Newsom is, and I think he embodies what all Democratic governors want to do. They just want to tweet about problems. They don't actually want to solve anything. They don't actually want to do any of the hard work that comes with being a governor. And also it's what they want the public to believe, that that's all they can do as well. So yeah, any more thoughts on Gavin Newsom?
Yeah, and he might actually be getting recalled as governor, because only 100,000 signatures are needed for him to be recalled right now. And obviously, if he's come across as having really failed to deal with this pandemic over the recent months, then you certainly cannot rule that out as a distinct possibility.
No, that is definitely looking like a possibility right now. I mean, he'll probably win because he's a Democrat in California, but yeah, that would be quite embarrassing. And to sum this video all up, have the Democrats been let off by the fact that Trump has taken a lot of the blame for coronavirus and the pandemic in the United States? I'd say yes, definitely yes. I think if, you had another Democrat, say Joe Biden, in office and the pandemic had started when he was president, I think you probably wouldn't say as many deaths, but you'd see a hell of a lot. The United States would still be, one of the worst countries in the world in terms of their COVID death rate. And you just have to look at Cuomo and Newsom in California and New York, again, the two big Democratic states, to see, yes, I see no reason why Democrats would have handled the coronavirus that much better than Donald Trump. It's because of a few things. I think Democrats love to get bogged down in that technocratic bullshit, and generally, because of who they are, what they believe in, they're incompetent. Or maybe they're not incompetent, it's just that they don't put public safety as their number one priority. And that's why some of their decisions at times may seem just crazy. It's because at the end of the day, if you're not focused on public health as your biggest priority and focused on, say, the economy, naturally what will happen is public health will be compromised, as we have seen in our country in the UK, and we have seen in America, even in democratic states. Following the science is great and all, but suddenly when your donors are worried that following the science might cost them some profits, suddenly, as Cuomo and Newsom have shown, the science maybe for Democrats isn't as important as they first made it seem. Anything else to say, Michael?
Well, Luke, you know the phrase, follow the science? How about follow the money instead?
Good one, Michael. Good one.
Do it! Just